Our next speaker is Dr. Leelavati Krishnan.
Namaskar to everyone. Good afternoon. Can the students at the back hear me clearly? Can you hear me? Okay. See, some things were said about me right now. I would like to say one thing. There is one honor that Professor I.K. Naik himself has given me, which was not mentioned, so I will mention that. He gave me this great honor of inviting me to this conference, and in fact, he has also invited me earlier. Heartfelt thanks to him and to his whole team, to this whole college. It's wonderful being here and to see all these fresh young faces as well as the more mature ones. I think I am the oldest person in this hall, maybe after after Professor. I don't know if that is a privilege, but I think it is. Okay, I feel that way. Okay, so now I'll start on that note. In fact, my preceding speaker, Professor, has made some points that really touched me anyway because they are part of my presentation. So please don't accuse me of stealing the ideas. You'll see them on the PowerPoint. And I did not make the PowerPoint when it was going on. It was very refreshing to see those ideas. My topic is the challenges of undergraduate research in the social sciences. I think I heard him mentioning science, physics, and so on, but he also mentioned so many aspects of social sciences that do not get the attention that they deserve. Advance, please. Yeah. Advance the slide, please. Next slide. Okay. But actually, if you look at what is happening, particularly in the Indian scenario, when we use the term research, somehow very naturally we connect it with the natural sciences. So it's all right to do physics, chemistry research, biology research, and medical research, and the life sciences in general. But then if somebody asks this question, how do you do research in literature? Any kind of literature, Kannada or English or Hindi or whatever else. Okay, how do you do research in sociology? Psychology, my field is psychology. There are many people who will sort of turn around and say, what did you say? So what does research in that area mean? Okay, I'm very happy that students now know that research goes much, much beyond just watching beakers and pipettes and burettes. That is in fact, you can do research even without washing these things, right? You don't necessarily have to do it. This is just the bare minimum. But if you do research after knowing these bare minimum principles, wonderful. Whether it is physics or whether it is human sciences, I think the basic principle of research, curiosity and so on, remain very, very common, but there are many challenges when you get down to the ground to see how research can be done in fields that belong to the social sciences. So I'll just share some ideas about that. Not just research in the natural sciences versus the social sciences. Actually, I should not even use that word social versus. It's also a question of what educational level is most appropriate, optimal for conducting research. So once again, when we use that word research, what comes first to mind is either master's level, what we call the postgraduate level, or PhD is also considered postgraduate, doctoral level. Okay? You don't necessarily need a degree to do research, but yes, in our minds, we associate this idea of the concept of research with either master's or PhD. Now, thankfully, in our country also, we are thinking of doing research at a level lower than postgraduate. You start early. If you want to learn a musical instrument, if you want to learn dancing or vocal music and so on, it is much better to start with at an early age, is it not? So suppose we say the same thing for research skills. What is the best age? There's no straight answer to that. But an exposure at an early age definitely helps. So I think what happened in the physics lab here, by calling students to do those really minimal things in a lab, is actually a very good starting point because you at least get to see what is a lab, a laboratory. Likewise, the whole world around us is a human laboratory. Human beings are there everywhere. You don't really need to be enclosed by four walls if you want to study human behavior, which is essentially what social sciences are all about. So undergraduate level is any level below MA, but hopefully at the college level, university level. Next slide, please. So now at least there is that kind of understanding and recognition that research in social sciences is also meaningful, and the general concept of social sciences, this definition may have other forms as well, but a general concept is it includes those mental and cultural sciences which deal with the activities of the individual as a member of a group. Individual, of course, but all individuals now, you don't have a choice now. You're all members of a group. The group can be just this college in Kumta, the group can be the state level, country, etc., etc. But you are a member of a group, and that group has a lot of influence on how you think, how you behave particularly, the kind of relationships you create, the kind of values you acquire, something that Professor emphasized. Extremely important. So you may be the best physicist, the best biologist in the world, but sorry if you do not inculcate those necessary values which make you human. Ultimately, sorry, you're going to fail. Doesn't matter how many research publications you have. In fact, you can be a wonderful human being without any research publications. But there is something to be said about in favor of publications as well. Now, there's a general classification. I won't go into that. Next slide, please. I mean, there are many disciplines now coming up, but in general, the disciplines that were mentioned on this slide are supposed to be part of social sciences. There is a major advantage in doing and promoting undergraduate research. Number one, it's an effective preparation and stepping stone to PG research. In other words, if somebody is looking for taking students into the master's program anywhere, if the student or the applicant has some research experience at the undergraduate level, that is definitely an advantage because the preparation has already been made. Number two, it develops analytical critical thinking as research should. That was also mentioned by more than one speaker as a part of education in general. Now, please don't think I'm saying that you need analytical and critical thinking only if you're planning to do research. You need it anyway. And that is, I'm sorry to say, sometimes a sad part of the education in countries like ours, where rote learning is emphasized, something that, yeah, I agree completely. Rote learning is rot learning. I think we should take away the word learning. There is no learning in rot. Why? Because you're repeating verbatim sometimes exactly what you were taught in the class. What do you learn? Only to repeat what was said, right? But nobody's testing for that. There is nothing novel that does not tell us what you have thought. I used to have that problem, by the way, in my initial years, even at a place like IIT. It was a wonderful, exciting experience for me as a teacher. But one question that used to come up sometimes, not with all students, these students had the choice of taking either psychology, economics, sociology, philosophy, and so on. And if they opted for psychology, or for that matter, any subject in the social sciences, at least as a teacher, I feel the emphasis should be on what you are thinking. So I'll give you reading assignments, of course, but please don't think I'm going to ask you a question like, who started the first laboratory in psychology? No. That's like a historical fact. I will ask you something that goes beyond that. Knowing that so-and-so started a psychology lab in such and such a place in Leipzig, Germany, what happened after that is what I would like you to understand. So some students used to get very annoyed because they probably thought, oh, psychology, that is like a very free, the word uses cool. It's a very cool subject. So why am I being asked to think? So I used to tell them, sorry. You can curse me all that you want, but I'm doing my job as a teacher as I think fit. And those who graduated later, I have some emails from them, wrote back saying, ma'am, please never change your style of teaching. So I patted myself on the back. At least I did something right. Okay. The third part, with proper, the slide is not yet over. One more point. With proper mentoring, UG research also independently can contribute very meaningfully to existing research. There are several examples of it I cannot give you right now, but in psychology also, some students, UG students who have assisted very senior professors have actually come up with very new ideas that have taken the research further, advancement further in that area. Okay, so there is no question UG research in the sciences, but also in the social sciences is very important. But there are several challenges that are faced, particularly in the social sciences. Next slide, please. Thank you. Number one, because even at the UG level, research in the common and the natural sciences is much, much more common and is also accepted more. Somehow, social science research sometimes gets a back seat, and particularly at the UG level. You see, many teachers, many mentors don't understand what is to be done in terms of social science research, but that becomes a big challenge. You have to break that kind of thinking. I would say very, very boldly that social science research deserves at least as much importance as natural science research, even though it may not appear to be as material. You know, so for instance, in the physical sciences, particularly if it leads to something like technology change, you see the product. In the social sciences, where behavior... Hello? I've been asked to use this mic. Is that all right? Okay. So, I can walk. Very good. Excellent idea. I like to do that. In the social sciences, sometimes what happens is people look for something like a product. You can't get a product in the social sciences, please. And if that product or that change is going to come, it takes a very long time. So people don't have the patience. All this put together, the prestige attached to social science research, especially at the UG level, goes down. Big challenge, once again. Number two, the kind of methods that are adopted in the social sciences are sometimes labeled as inexact. They're not as exact as in the natural sciences. Actually, in the social sciences also, we use both qualitative and quantitative research methods. Quantitative means you're attaching numbers. That's easy to understand. And once again, let me put it very bluntly. The prestige value of quantitative research, even in the social sciences, seems to be higher than that of qualitative methods. But now things are changing. For instance, look at what is happening in literature, in philosophy. They also do research. I don't think there is anybody in literature who attaches numbers to what they are saying. How can you do that? Okay? But does that mean that has less value? Not at all. It's something to keep in mind. Okay, next slide, please. The third challenge is social science funding is limited. There are very few bodies, very few organizations that fund social science research, and even these bodies don't really take UG research as priority. Indian Council of Social Science Research, ICSSR. I don't know how many of you have even heard about that body. The major funding body, organization, and it's a government-run body. First of all, they themselves don't have that many funds. Secondly, they also feel, okay, we must give priority to UG, PhD, that level of research, not UG research. So once again, there is a reason. I mean, it's like a challenge. It's a hurdle that one has to pass. What are the possible reasons? Once again, I've already mentioned it. Priority is given to STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. That's primary. Sometimes people add, STEAM in it, okay? That is, social sciences are also added in between, but not to the same extent. Okay, next slide, please. Actually, the truth is that because social science research usually requires less equipment, you don't have these big machines and things like that, less money is required. And therefore, many funding agencies will say, oh, but you're doing abstract research, social science research, so why do you need money? So funding also goes down. There are all these problems put together, and I think the most difficult hurdle to cross is motivation to research at the UG level is a very difficult question. If you find a motivated researcher, I'm addressing all of you now, whether you're in the social sciences, literature, humanities, and so on, or in the physical sciences, if you identify even one student who shows that spark, the motivation for doing research, please grab that opportunity. Please try to polish that gem. You won't find many of them, particularly at the UG level. And I don't think you will regret having taken trouble, they put in the effort to train that person to do research further. And there are people who have written about it. I've just cited a few. And what has been pointed out, and I'm just mentioning one author, Chatterjee and Sen. In fact, they take the case of medical research done at the UG level, that is in the initial years of medical college, let us say, and they find that motivational level there also is pretty low. And if you now look at the situation in the social sciences, any social science, it won't be very different. Next slide, please. Analytical thinking is required in the social science research, of course, also in the natural sciences, but sadly, analytical critical thinking is not made part of our school education in general. That is, when you start learning something, somehow, particularly students in school, and I would request all of you to think back of what you were doing in school. Can you even recall one teacher who encouraged you to come out with new ideas? Okay? Can you recall even one teacher who looked at your assignment, homework, and if you put in something new that was different from what was taught in class, did you get congratulated for it, or did you get scolded for it? Or at least chided, or criticizing, okay, this is a good idea, but please, it won't fetch you marks in the exam. Everything was exam-oriented, right? Now that does not encourage analytical thinking, please. And I think we need that. That's really a big priority right now. We miss that analytical thinking, and I'm not saying it just for the sake of saying it, please. Unless all of us get into this habit of thinking about what we are doing, why we are doing something, what, how, and why. These three questions must be part of any kind of research. Even if you're not doing research as part of our life, if you just stop and think about why you're doing what you're doing, perhaps things will change. That is part of analytical thinking. That is part of critical thinking. Where did I go wrong? Critical thinking does not mean criticizing people. At least if you must criticize, please criticize yourself first. Okay? And you can be critical only if you analyze. And that, sadly, is part of missing in our education, both at the school level and I'm also sorry to say early college education. Sometimes it comes in at the postgraduate level. And finally, mentoring for research skills is not given sufficient attention, particularly in the social sciences. That is, somebody is to guide you to do research, okay? And that is not very, very well advanced, at least in the social sciences. Next slide, please. Okay, now there have been reviews. Once again, I'll just read out the last sentence here. The overall impression that one gets even now, these days, because things have changed for the better, but even now, the education system in our country recognizes the importance of social sciences at all levels, including UG level, but sorry, it still does not particularly promote it at the UG level. PG level, master's level and doctoral level, yes, they are being promoted. In fact, many people are saying we must do better research, and so on. But at the UG level, not much is being done. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, the question is, how can these hurdles be crossed? Okay, now, let me give you a disclaimer to begin with. I'm sure many of you will consider what I'm going to say a little idealistic, impractical, if you want to use that word, but please give it a second thought. We are all teachers here in some form or the other, so it would be a good idea to at least consider the possibility. And I'm going to, psychologists have suggested a few, in fact, a lot of principles, but I'm going to focus only on 4 things that psychological research has brought out. The first one is what is called engaged learning. This is described by experts as deep, purposeful, and reflective learning. That is, you don't learn only at the superficial level. The best example of superficial learning is just repeating by rote, mechanically, what has been taught in school, taught in class, has been given in your reading assignments, in your lecture notes, and so on. Okay? Many students at the university level are very happy if they get questions in the examination, university examination, which simply ask them to repeat what they have learned. I think that's a bad way of teaching anything, but okay, maybe we have to live with it for some years. So at least to some extent, in teaching in the classroom, if teachers can promote what is called deep, purposeful, and reflective learning, train students to think, to reflect on what information they've been given. And I was so happy to hear Professor talking about asking questions. Incidentally, there is this lady called Dr. Kamala Mukunda. She's, I think, working in a school, a special kind of non-traditional school just outside Bangalore. Her father is a physics professor, I think, IISc. And she's written this fantastic book, thin book. It's basically on cognitive processes. And the title is, "What Did You Ask at School Today?" Very much like what Feynman's mother used to ask him, not emphasizing what did you learn, what did you eat, how many friends did you have. What questions did you ask in school? The importance of asking questions is immense. Kamala asked me to review her book, and I did it happily, very happily. When I wrote that review, I started getting requests, and it started being called my article. And I had to write to all of them saying, please, this is not my article. I'm just talking about what somebody has written in that book. Read the book. I recommend it very highly. It would help if you have some kind of background in psychological processes, but not very much. Try to read it. I really recommend it. What did you ask at school today? That is the title of the book. Dr. Kamala Mukunda. I'm forgetting the publisher's name as usual, but you'll find it. You'll find it anywhere. Okay. That is important, and that also is an example of reflective learning. Okay. Next slide, please. The second process is what is called cognitive complexity. Let me tell you, I don't have names here, but there are several researchers who have, through their research findings, found out that Indians in general, or Indian thinking, is more on the complex side rather than the simple side. Now, what does cognitive complexity mean? The best way to describe it, in the simplest words that I can think of, is it refers to an individual's tendency or ability to process information by incorporating, by taking in more rather than less information. The same question will be answered by taking in as much information that is available as possible rather than the minimal information. Now, it's very difficult to give you an illustration straight away, but I will make an attempt. Tests of cognitive complexity are extremely simple. So I say, okay, think of 5 important countries in the world. 5 important countries. The number is 5. What you have to think about is countries, and they have to be important. You decide what is important, okay? So you think of those 5. And then I say, classify these 5. How do you classify them? It is this classification task that gives you a very clear indication of whether the thinking is cognitively complex or simple. Most people will say, well, I'll take one attribute, one quality at a time, okay? But many others will say, can I take more than one dimension? The more dimensions you take in, and yet make that classification, the more cognitively complex you are. Another question that will come up is, can one country come in more than one category? Okay, that's also an indication of complexity, and so on. Now, there are many people who are cognitively complex rather than simple, but our educational system, once again, teachers have much less patience for cognitively complex people than simple people. When a student repeats the answer as the teacher wants it repeated, that's very convenient for the teacher. Which students are troublesome, troublemakers? Those who ask too many questions, and those who come up with answers that the teacher cannot justify. Okay? as teachers, we have to look out for such students, please. They are valuable. We have to nurture cognitive complexity. That's also associated with analytical and critical thinking. Okay, the earlier you start, that is, if you can do it at the UG level, the better it is. Okay, next slide, please. The third one is encouraging creativity. I liked the word that professor used. I did not know, I don't know Kannada, but I heard the word Srijanshilate, right? Okay, beautiful. Srijanshilata in Hindi, Srijanshil is a Sanskrit word. Srijan is creating. Okay, what do you create? Many people will say, but create what? Create what? There's no answer to that question. You can create just about anything. A scientist sometimes creates theories based on something, of course. An artist creates a work of art. It can be a painting, it can be sculpture, it can be anything at all. What do human beings create? Many, many, many things. In our culture, the Indian culture, at least in the north, the word used is jugaad. Have you heard that word jugaad? Sometimes it has a derogatory meaning, making things with very little resources, makeshift. If you use the word makeshift in English, that's not paying anybody a big compliment, please, okay? But from the psychological point of view, from the point of view of creativity, there is immense creativity, immense innovation. So in trouble periods, when you are facing a problem somewhere, let's say something goes wrong with your car on the highway and there is no garage, no repairman anywhere, you will find some drivers. They have never been trained in any kind of engineering, but they will do something and make the car run. What do? Find out, please, okay? Sometimes that is what is called jugaad. Should you be happy about it? Should you be unhappy? So some engineer will come and say, oh, that's good, but that's not technically sound. So he'll just forget technical soundness. At that point, I want my car to run. Do I achieve that purpose? The point is yes. The answer is yes. There are several examples of this kind of innovativeness or creativity that has to be nurtured. You will find such students, please. I can't believe that in this group sitting here, there is not sufficient creativity. You find it at all levels. The question is, do we recognize it? Do we encourage it? Or do we say, well, that's okay, that's very good, but sorry, we have no use for it. Don't think, that I have not heard this kind of statement. I have heard it from very senior people as well. But it's not very practical, it's not very useful. So I just keep quiet. And I say, God, help them to see that it is useful. If not today, tomorrow. Okay. And the last point is valuing what is called intrinsic motivation. That simply means that you are doing something for the pleasure of it. Once again, Professor mentioned it. That's the reason I said, sir, that you have read my mind. Why do natural science people do research? Because nature is beautiful. Whether you give them a medal, whether you give them Padma Shri or Padma Vibhushan or whatever, does not matter. Whether you even publish your work does not matter. You do it for the sake of doing it and doing it well. Very much like a craftsman creates something just because, there is a beauty in it and he or she has that pleasure in creating that object. So intrinsic motivation simply refers to motivation that comes from within the person, without any pressure from outside, without any reward. In fact, in research on intrinsic motivation, psychologists have found, first of all, that anything done on the basis of intrinsic motivation is sustained. It stays on. If you try to reward that kind of behavior, that kind of achievement, then the degree of intrinsic motivation goes down. Because the person finds himself or herself saying, oh, okay, so is this why I did it? I did this work, I got this achievement because I wanted this prize, this scholarship, or this recognition. Then the excitement goes away, and that does not allow you to grow. Okay, next slide, please. Sorry. Is that the next one? These four, engaged learning, cognitive complexity, and creativity are directly associated with what we can call a research attitude or a research temper. You know, we use the phrase scientific temper. It's the same thing for research temper. Intrinsic motivation sustains this attitude. So for all kinds of research, UG, PG, social science, natural sciences, these factors will definitely help in promoting the attitude towards research, but also most likely improve the quality, enhance the quality of the kind of research that is being done. In our present scenario, education scenario in India, there are so many constraints. I mean, we can't really blame people. It may be difficult, practically difficult to promote or nurture these 4 qualities. But as I said at the beginning, please let us all try. Okay, next slide, please. I think that's going to be. This is the final comment. We have a new educational policy. Now, of course, I've not studied it very, very thoroughly. I don't find a direct reference, of course, is there, but there is nothing direct being said about UG research, and certainly not in the social sciences. But there are many things that are included there that reflect on the importance of UG research in the social sciences, of course, in the physical sciences, natural sciences as well. And one is, of course, critical thinking. That is directly mentioned. You have to promote critical thinking. And by the way, we have to promote critical thinking whether there is a new educational policy or not. Please note, nobody can punish you as a teacher if you promote critical thinking, as long as you follow the other rules if you want to, okay? And they have this motto. I like these 3 words, okay? Educate, encourage, and enlighten. Once again, maybe it sounds very idealistic, but there is no harm in trying. Now, I just have one more slide that is conclusion. So can I please get that slide? So training for UG research has advantages, but involves more challenges, and these challenges are stronger in the case of social sciences than in the natural sciences. The present discussion has highlighted some of these hurdles, and it is suggested that by attempting to incorporate these 4 processes that I mentioned, we may pave the way for critical thinking among UGs and thereby create an environment. Vibrant is the word. I had written it in my abstract. I repeat it. Somebody in the morning had mentioned this. Vibrant environment for social science research. By the way, one question that I have is there anybody here who has taken psychology? Any psychology student? Oh, great, great. Anybody in sociology? Ah, wonderful. Okay. And I'm not going to ask about physics, etc., because I know you are there. Okay. Please, all of you should join hands. The physics students can talk to the psychology student. The psychology students can talk to the physics students and see if you can sort of integrate some ideas. And this is the way we do it. Is that the way you do it? Yes, we do. And then you'll find that ultimately, research is research. Start with a set of questions. Try to answer them using the appropriate methods. And please, finish with a set of questions that need to be answered. I know my PhD students really did not forgive me for saying this particular start with the questions. Ma'am, how will we know what questions are? Go to the literature, please. Review the literature. Come out with unanswered questions. I was making no compromise about that. You don't start your data collection until you know that you are addressing unanswered questions. What is the use of trying to do work, spend your money, spend your resources and your effort on something that has already been answered? Okay, so look for new questions, unanswered questions, and when you finish your research, see what has not been answered. That to me, and that is what would be an unending ladder of questions. Very true, a good way of describing research. Last slide, please. Last slide. That is the best slide of all. Thank you very much for your patient listening. And I will say, Daswadanya. Okay, until we meet again. Professor Nayak, please invite me again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Leelavati Krishnan, Madam. I now request Dr. Manjunath, sir, to felicitate Madam with the memento. Thank you, Madam, for your effective speech on challenges of undergraduate research in social sciences. Thank you once again, ma'am.